word racist has long been the most damning slur in American life, and for good reason. It's hard to think of anything crueler or more unfair than discriminating against someone because of the color of his skin. You don't control the color of your skin. Nobody likes racists. Nobody wants to be called a racist. The left knows that, so they use the word as a cudgel to beat their political opponents into submission and have their way. They've done this so often and for so many years that over time the word racist has lost a lot of its power. It's dulled from overuse. The left needs a new attack line, a new way to make you shut up and obey. Now they've found one. Watch former Georgia politician Stacey Abrams deploy it against White House advisor Stephen Miller.
What about the man who's also really leading this for the White House, Stephen Miller? He is spearheading the immigration agenda, and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar actually referred to him as a white nationalist. Do you agree with her?
I believe that what we have seen from Stephen Miller is vestiges of white nationalism.
White nationalism. Let's be literal for a minute. What is that exactly? Abrams didn't say, she didn't have to say. The phrase hits you in the gut, not the head. It evokes images from a nightmare. Detention camps, deportation trains, mass killing. It's terrifying. You'd rather be called a cannibal than a white nationalist. And of course, that is exactly the point. That's why they say it.
We have a white nationalist president who's a threat to American democracy.
It's the language of white nationalist, European splinter, hard right, crazy town parties, and we haven't heard it in our politics in a long time.
It's going to be Stephen Miller, and his sort of white nationalist tendencies are really obvious. You can't even dress that up.
I don't think it's a stretch for a lot of Americans out there to wonder whether or not the president is secretly considering himself a white nationalist.
Again, you'll notice that none of these dumb people pause even for a second to explain to you what a white nationalist is. You probably still don't know, and honestly, neither do we, and that's because there are so very few of them in this country. There are probably about as many legitimate white nationalists in America as there are Russian spies. You could live your entire life here without running into a white nationalist. No matter what they tell you, this is a remarkably kind and decent country. What's telling is that according to the left, only certain people qualify for the title white nationalist. You just heard Stephen Miller denounced as one for his support of the temporary family separation at the U.S. border. But it turns out the Obama administration did essentially the very same thing to immigrant families, split them up. Are they white nationalists too? Well, watch CNN's Samantha Vinograd explain.
And when President Obama separated children from their families' wealth, or from adults' wealth, it was for their protection.
Right.
It was if there was a risk of trafficking or other kind of harm that might have been incurred.
So just to recap, those of you keeping track at home, when Obama did it, it was for their protection, Wolf. When Trump does it, it's white nationalism. How does this work exactly? Well, Candace Owens unraveled the mystery yesterday in testimony before Congress. Watch.
There isn't a single adult today that in good conscience would make the argument that America is a more racist or a more white nationalist society than it was when my grandfather was growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election.
Aha. That's the answer. It's election season. The left has nothing to sell, nothing that will make your life better. So instead, they whip up race hatred and fear. Scared people vote. Just tell them the other side wants to put them in camps or murder them, and they'll show up at the polls and vote for you, however reluctantly. The left has known this for a long time. They've been doing it for generations. They're more explicit about it now than they ever have been. But what's the cost of campaigning like this? Democracies succeed when they're built on the belief that we're all in this together. When they become tests of strength between two groups that hate each other, they fall apart. Attacking people for their race is exactly how you destroy a country. That's what Democrats are doing. They know they're doing it. It's obvious. They just don't care. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he joins us tonight. Professor Hanson, thanks very much for coming on. So I can't help but wonder over time what the effect on the population of the country, of all people, of all colors, and let me just state sincerely, almost all of whom are good people, it's America, but what's the effect on them when they hear this every day? How does it make them feel about their neighbors, about the country itself? How does it make them feel about our future as a country?
I think they've almost tuned it out now, Tucker. We've jumped the proverbial shark because in the last 10 days, African-American director of the Heritage Foundation, Kay James, African-American activist, Candace Owens, Jewish-American Steve Miller have all been called either a white supremacist or a white nationalist. And when everybody is a white nationalist, nobody is. And why is this happening? Well, that's what's so, befuddling. And I think the reason is that it's in part, it's the demonization of Trump supporters, because after the 25th Amendment, the Emoluments Clause, the Mueller investigation, Stormy and Michael Cohen, there's always some magic bullet that's going to take Trump out. And this is now the white nationalist conspiracy, and it doesn't exist. And I think there's also fear, Tucker, because Trump's economic agenda has really achieved record low Hispanic and African American unemployment. And when he weighs in about the anti-Catholic bias of a Kamala Harris, or the plague of abortion on minority communities, or an open borders effects on driving down wages, that appeals to minority voters. Maybe 20% of black voters or 45% of Hispanic voters. And under the current Democratic calculus, they have so alienated the white working class with slurs like we just heard, but also the deplorables, the clingers, the irredeemables, or what Joe Biden called the dregs of society. They can't afford to lose any of that minority bloc voting, or they're in real trouble. And finally, it's very sad because the engines that are driving this new democratic socialist identity politics party, the Omars, the Ocasio-Cortez, the Tlaibs, the Al Sharptons, the Linda Saussures, they don't have any realm of reference outside of identity politics. It's all day long, 24/7, race, religion, gender. And when they venture out of that prison, they talk about the internal combustion engine or the history of 9/11 or the geography of the Middle East, they know nothing.
Yeah.
And so we want some intervention, and we look to Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer, but they're terrified that these Pied Pipers represent 50% of their own party. And we look for a senior statesman. Bob Kerrey was heroic in warning about this extremism, but look at Barack Obama. I mean, he was edgy in 2008, I guess, and now he would be considered passé. And when he weighed in, it was very timid about, a circular firing squad or something, but it's almost, he's become a tragic comic figure because he's really into I did build that, and now's the time to profit moment as he seeks, his own personal wealth, more power to him. But there's no leadership anywhere there that can say, you guys have to stop this because you're destroying a once noble party.
And a wonderful country, too. And making people hate each other.
Wonderful
You
country.
whip up race hatred, that's what you do, and that's what they're doing. They're whipping up race hatred, and it's terrifying, I think. Professor, thank you very much. It's great to see you tonight.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
So virtually every Democrat running for president has come out for reparations for slavery. But Cory Booker, and leave it to Cory Booker, the innovator, he's going one step further. Cory Booker wants reparations for drug dealers. That's next. We also have new details about possible prison sentences for the actors involved in the college cheating scandal. We'll bring those to you after the break.